Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through all the noise and get right to the heart of what really matters. Today we're diving into Speed Wins. It's by Colin Price and Sharon Toya. These folks, they've spent years studying high-performing companies, and they've kind of cracked the code on what makes them tick. And guess what? We're sharing all the secrets with you.
What's really fascinating about their work is that it's not just about moving fast, it's about moving intelligently. There's this strategic element to speed that's often overlooked.
Oh, absolutely. And they don't just tell you what to do, they back it up with solid data. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's set the stage. We all want our companies to be successful, right? I mean, who doesn't? But here's the thing, and get ready for this. The single biggest predictor of a company's future value isn't what you might think. It's not about being in the right industry or having the coolest product.
It's about organic revenue growth.
Bingo. That's right. Forget industry trends. Your ability to grow organically is the key to long-term success.
And this makes sense when you think about it. Organic growth means you're consistently attracting and keeping customers. You're adapting to market changes. And you're coming up with new and innovative ideas. It's really a sign of a truly healthy and thriving organization.
Okay, so how do we achieve this magical organic growth? Speed Wins introduces this concept of super accelerators. These are companies that just consistently outperform their competitors. And these companies, they aren't just lucky. They're doing something different. And the authors break it down into 4 key areas. Think of it as your cheat sheet for success.
They call it meta mobilization, execution, transformation, and agility. And the key is that these 4 areas work together like a well-oiled machine. You can't just focus on one and expect to see results. It's about creating a system where all 4 elements are firing on all cylinders to drive that sustainable growth.
And they dig even deeper. They identify 13 specific factors that drive success in these 4 areas. Speed is at the heart of every single one of them, making decisions quickly, responding to customers in a flash, and constantly iterating and improving.
And they also identified what they call drag factors. These are things like unclear decision rights, bureaucratic processes, and a lack of accountability. All things that create organizational friction and slow everything down.
It's like trying to run a race with your shoelaces tied together, right?
Right. You're not going anywhere fast. But here's the kicker. A lot of times these drag factors aren't intentional. They kind of creep up on companies as they grow and become more complex. It's like organizational clutter.
Exactly. And that's where strong leadership comes in. You need someone to declutter, set a clear direction, and to empower the team to move quickly and decisively.
Let's talk about leadership. They found a huge difference in how leaders act in companies that are accelerating versus those that are falling behind. I mean, we all know leadership is important, but the data really drives home just how critical it is.
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense. Leaders set the tone. They shape the culture. And they ultimately determine how fast a company can move. They need to champion change, remove obstacles, and give their teams the power to take risks and innovate. Speaking of obstacles, they highlight some common mental traps that can trip up even the most experienced leaders. Things like anchoring bias, where you get stuck on the first piece of information you hear, or the availability heuristic, where you overestimate the importance of information that's readily available. It's like wearing blinders.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And effective leaders are aware of these biases, and they actively work to overcome them. They seek out diverse viewpoints. They challenge their own assumptions, and they're constantly asking themselves questions like, what don't I know that I need to know? And how can I disrupt the market? They have a growth mindset and are always looking for ways to improve.
So we've got strong leadership, we're moving fast, making decisions. But what about the team? Are they all on the same page, rowing in the same direction?
That's where things get really interesting. They found something pretty counterintuitive. Team effectiveness actually declines the higher up you go in an organization.
Wait, seriously, that seems backwards. You'd think the more experience people have, the better they'd work together.
Right. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it often comes down to competing agendas and a lack of focus on the overall goals of the organization. Senior leaders often get so focused on their own departments that they lose sight of the bigger picture.
It's like they forget they're all part of the same team.
Exactly. They fall into the trap of advocating for their own departments instead of collaborating to find solutions that benefit the whole organization. And this lack of alignment and cohesion creates friction, which of course slows everything down.
So how do you fix that? How do you get everyone back on the same page and rowing in the same direction?
Price and Toya emphasize the importance of shared goals, open communication, and a willingness to put the collective good above individual interests. You need a CEO who can create a cohesive leadership team that's truly focused on the big picture. And of course, there's another crucial ingredient.
Oh, I know this one. Trust. You can't have a high-performing team without it.
Exactly. Leaders need to build an environment where team members feel comfortable sharing their ideas, challenging each other's perspectives, and holding each other accountable. It's about creating a safe space where everyone can contribute their best work.
Okay, so we've got strong leadership, a cohesive team at the top. But what about everyone else? How do you get the whole organization moving at the speed of light?
That's where the often overlooked middle management comes in. And there's a great story in the book about a manufacturing company that was acquired by new owners. These new owners came in all ready to shake things up and make the company grow faster. They brought in a new strategy, new leadership, new incentives, the whole works. But a year later, they were barely making any progress.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. Why weren't they seeing results?
They completely overlooked the middle management layer.
I see where you're going with this. You can't just change the strategy and leadership at the top and expect the entire organization to magically fall in line. You need to get buy-in from the middle managers, the folks who are actually responsible for implementing the new strategy and leading their teams on a daily basis.
Precisely. Middle managers are the linchpin between strategy and execution. They're the ones who translate the big ideas into actionable plans and who motivate and engage their teams to make it happen.
So how do you effectively mobilize the middle? They can't just be order takers. They need to be active participants in the change process, right?
Absolutely. The book highlights some great strategies, connecting them to the overall purpose and strategy, giving them more autonomy and decision-making power, and empowering them to lead change initiatives within their own teams. It's about making them feel like valued partners in the transformation process, not just cogs in the machine.
It's like you're creating an army of mini CEOs, all aligned with the same vision and empowered to make a difference. That's powerful stuff.
It really is. But even with the best leaders, the most cohesive teams, and a highly engaged middle management layer, there's one more crucial piece of the puzzle that's often neglected.
Ooh, this is good. Tell me more.
Training. In today's world where things are changing at lightning speed, ongoing training isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. You need to constantly be upskilling your workforce to keep up with the pace of change and stay ahead of the curve.
You're preaching to the choir here. I'm a huge believer in the power of continuous learning. But I know what you're going to say. A lot of companies still see training as an expense rather than an investment. They're so focused on cutting costs that they neglect one of the most important drivers of long-term success.
It's short-sighted, isn't it? They're penny-wise and pound-foolish. And the data backs this up. Companies with strong leadership development programs consistently outperform their peers in terms of financial performance, talent retention, and innovation.
So what kind of training should companies be investing in? What are the key areas that will have the biggest impact on their ability to accelerate?
Speedwins highlights 5 key training topics: accountability, enterprise leadership, influencing with impact, stakeholder navigation, and leader as coach. These topics give leaders the tools and mindsets they need to thrive in a fast-paced, complex environment. It's about developing leaders who can make decisions quickly, collaborate effectively, and inspire their teams to achieve ambitious goals.
Okay, so we've equipped our leaders and teams, we've mobilized the middle, and we've instilled a culture of continuous learning. What's the next step in our journey towards organizational acceleration?
Now we need to streamline the pathways to success by optimizing our key processes. This is where things can really get bogged down and kill speed.
Processes. Ugh, I can already feel my eyes glazing over.
Yeah.
But I know they're important, so tell me more.
They are important. And Speedwins introduces this concept of signature processes, the critical processes that directly drive revenue, cost reduction, cash flow, and risk management. These are the lifeblood of your organization.
And you need to treat them like royalty, right?
Exactly. These signature processes need to be clearly documented, owned by a member of the leadership team, digitized as much as possible, constantly being improved, and monitored through a performance dashboard. Basically, you need to treat them like the crown jewels of your organization, constantly polishing them for maximum impact.
Okay, so signature processes are the VIPs of our organization. But what about all the other processes, the ones that aren't directly driving revenue or managing risk?
That's where things get interesting. The authors argue that every single process in the company should have a direct connection to revenue up, cost down, cash in, or risk out.
So if a process doesn't fit into one of those categories, what do you do with it?
It's a candidate for elimination or simplification. It's about being laser focused on the activities that truly move the needle.
I love it. ruthlessly cutting out anything that's not adding value.
Yeah.
But I imagine that can be tough to do in practice. People get attached to the way things have always been done, even if those ways are no longer efficient or effective.
It's true. Sometimes the biggest obstacles to simplification are mental. People become creatures of habit, and they resist change. It requires a shift in mindset to embrace simplicity. And to see it as a source of strength, not weakness, it's about realizing that complexity is often the enemy of speed.
Speaking of complexity, I'm curious, how do you know if a process is good complex or bad complex? Is there a simple way to tell the difference?
That's a great question. And Speedwins makes an important distinction between the two. Think of Sephora, for instance. They offer a vast range of beauty products, tens of thousands of them.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of products. I could barely keep up with the new mascara releases, let alone tens of thousands of beauty products.
Exactly. It's complex, but it's good complexity because it's what their customers demand. It's necessary for them to compete in that market.
So what's an example of bad complexity?
Imagine an insurance company with outdated IT systems. They might have 50 different systems that don't talk to each other. This makes simple tasks like changing a price incredibly slow and cumbersome. That's bad complexity because it adds no value for customers and only serves to slow the organization down.
It's like having a Ferrari but driving it with the parking brake on.
Perfect analogy.
So how do you get rid of that bad complexity? Where do you even start?
Speedwins offers a ton of practical tips for simplifying and streamlining operations. Think about eliminating unnecessary approvals, meetings, and paperwork. Prioritize initiatives that directly drive revenue and reduce costs, re-engineer processes to take advantage of technology, and most importantly, create a culture where people feel comfortable challenging unnecessary complexity.
I love that. It's about empowering everyone in the organization to be on the lookout for ways to simplify and improve. It's about creating a culture of continuous improvement, where people aren't afraid to speak up and challenge the status quo.
Exactly. It's about making simplification a core value, a way of life. But before we dive into how to actually implement all of these amazing strategies, I want to pause for a moment and turn the conversation over to you, our listeners.
Yes, we've covered so much ground already, from the power of organic growth to the importance of leadership, teams, middle management, training, and processes.
We want to know what's resonating with you. What insights have sparked your curiosity? Which ideas do you find yourself wanting to explore further in relation to your own work or organization? Hold on to those thoughts because we'll be diving deeper into how to actually implement these principles for rapid change in just a moment.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork for building a high-speed organization, strong leadership, a cohesive team, engaged middle management, continuous learning, streamlined processes. But there's one final piece of the puzzle we need to discuss.
And it's a big one. Change management. Because let's be honest, even with all those pieces in place, change can still be a major hurdle for organizations.
It's like trying to turn a giant ship. It takes time, effort, and a lot of coordination.
Exactly. And you know, so many companies get this wrong. They launch these big, complex change initiatives with the best of intentions, and then they're surprised when they meet with resistance. Or they fail to deliver the desired results.
They're going full speed ahead, but they forgot to check if the rudder is working.
That's a great way to put it. And Speedwins highlights 6 common mistakes companies make when managing change, which I think are incredibly valuable to unpack. They offer real insights into how to approach change more effectively.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's break down these mistakes and see how we can avoid them. What's the first one?
The first mistake is focusing on resistance to change, instead of addressing the fear of loss that often underlies that resistance.
That makes sense. Change can be scary even if it's ultimately for the better. People worry about job security, losing status, or simply having to learn new ways of doing things. It's human nature to resist the unknown.
Exactly. So instead of trying to force change on people, it's more effective to address those underlying fears head on. Help them understand the why behind the change. What's in it for them? How will it benefit them and the organization as a whole?
It's about painting a picture of a better future, not just throwing a change grenade into the mix and hoping for the best.
Precisely. Acknowledge their concerns, provide support, and create a sense of psychological safety. Make them feel like they're a part of the solution, not the problem.
I love that. So, mistake number 1, address the fear, not just the resistance. What's the next pitfall to avoid?
The second mistake is relying on those old-school, cumbersome communication plans instead of real-time empowered communication.
Oh, this one resonates with me. I've seen so many change initiatives fail because the communication was either too slow, too vague, or just plain confusing.
It's like trying to navigate a maze with a blurry map and no compass. You're bound to get lost and frustrated.
Exactly. And in today's hyper-connected world, people expect information quickly and clearly. They want to know what's happening, how it affects them, and they want to be able to ask questions and get answers in real time.
That's right. Top-down, one-way communication just doesn't cut it anymore. You need to empower leaders at all levels to communicate directly with their teams, to be transparent about what's happening, and to create channels for ongoing dialogue and feedback.
It's about creating a culture of open communication where information flows freely and everyone feels comfortable sharing their thoughts and ideas.
Exactly. And that brings us to mistake number 3, using a one-size-fits-all approach to change.
Ah, yes, the classic, we've always done it this way mentality. But we all know that cookie-cutter solutions rarely work, especially when it comes to something as complex as organizational change.
You hit the nail on the head. Every change initiative is unique. And what works in one situation may not work in another. You need to be flexible, adapting your approach as needed, and using a variety of methods to engage different groups of people.
So it's about being more agile in your change management approach, right? Experiment, learn from your mistakes, and constantly adjust to find what works best in each situation. Kind of like being a change chameleon.
I love that analogy. You need to be able to blend in and adapt to the environment. And that leads us to the 4th mistake, failing to provide space for empowerment and experimentation.
This was a real pet peeve of mine. So often, change initiatives are driven from the top down, with very little input or autonomy given to the people who are actually expected to implement the changes. It's like telling people to cook you a delicious meal, but only giving them a rusty spoon in a broken oven.
Exactly. You're setting them up for failure. If you want people to embrace change and drive it forward, you need to give them the freedom to experiment, to try new things, and to learn from their experiences. It's about creating a culture where it's safe to take risks, and where failure is seen as a learning opportunity, not a career-ending move.
It's about fostering a growth mindset, not a fear-based mindset. I love that.
Okay,
What's
cool.
the next mistake on the list?
Mistake number 5 is over-relying on those specialist change resources, instead of empowering leaders to drive change.
Ah, yes, the consultant trap. Companies bring in these high-priced experts to manage the change process, but then they don't equip their own leaders to take ownership and sustain the changes over the long term.
It's like hiring a personal chef to cook healthy meals for you every day, but never learning how to cook yourself. You might see some initial results, but it's not sustainable. You need to learn the skills and build the habits yourself if you want to see lasting change.
Exactly. You can't outsource change leadership. You need to embed it in your organization's DNA.
Okay, we're on the last mistake now. What is it?
The final mistake is treating change as separate projects, instead of integrating it into the ongoing flow of work.
Ah, I see. It's like trying to lose weight by going on a crash diet. You might see some initial results, but it's not sustainable. You need to make lasting changes to your lifestyle if you want to keep the weight off. Exactly. Change can't be this separate thing that you do once in a while. It needs to be woven into the fabric of your organization's culture and operations.
So how do you do that? How do you make change an integral part of your organizational DNA?
It's about creating a culture of continuous improvement, where everyone is constantly looking for ways to do things better, faster, and more efficiently. Empower people to identify problems, propose solutions, and implement changes in a rapid and iterative way.
It's about making change the norm, not the exception.
Yeah.
Change is a way of life.
Exactly. And when you do that, when you embrace change as an opportunity rather than a threat, amazing things can happen. You become more adaptable, more innovative, and ultimately more successful.
I love that. So much great food for thought here. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the importance of organic growth to the power of leadership, and the need for continuous learning and process improvement. And now we've explored the critical role of change management in achieving true organizational acceleration.
It's been a fascinating journey, hasn't it? And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know. Speedwinds is packed with so many insights and practical strategies. But before we officially wrap up, I have a thought-provoking question for our listeners to ponder. Think about all the things we've talked about today, all the ingredients that go into creating a high-speed, adaptable organization. What's one concrete action you can take this week to inject more speed and agility into your own team or company?
Maybe it's finally tackling that process that's been driving everyone crazy, or having a courageous conversation about a much-needed change, or giving someone the green light to run with a new idea. What's that one thing you can do to make a difference?
Because remember, you're the expert on your own situation. Speed Wins gives you a fantastic framework, but it's up to you to apply these principles in a way that makes sense for your unique challenges and opportunities.
You have the power to make a real impact, so don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. And most importantly, don't be afraid to move fast.
If there's one thing we hope you take away from this deep dive, it's that speed isn't just about doing things faster. It's about doing the right things faster and more effectively. It's about being intentional, strategic, and always looking for ways to improve.
For those who are ready to embrace this challenge, the rewards are huge. Speed can be your ultimate competitive advantage, allowing you to outmaneuver the competition, respond to market shifts with agility, and ultimately achieve greater success.
So go forth
Head 'em.
and accelerate. We can't wait to see the amazing things you accomplish. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep diving deep.